Do you believe in God?
I don't believe in anything.
One of the things that scares people is the idea that we're creating something that's going to be smarter than us. Well, what I'm worried about more than anything is that human beings are going to become obsolete.
Hospitalizations for self-harm, especially among adolescent girls.
Yeah.
It's like been doubling every 3 years, basically, since Facebook was introduced.
Well,
now,
it's really
have a lot
from
of reasons,
the introduction of the smartphone. It's really
Right.
from 2007. It's the coddling of the American mind.
Yeah.
If people haven't read it, it's really good. And talking to Jonathan and getting the sort of, he's sending out a warning, like the British are coming, the British are coming. It really is like, the dangers are only going to be exacerbated by AR and whatever new technology comes along and haptic feedback suits and all this chaos. All the new stuff that's going to be invented over the next 10 years, 20 years is only going to be more immersive.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he just thinks that the social media companies have to be forced to at least not let kids on. Not like, I mean, like at the very least, it should be like cigarettes and booze, where they make a genuine attempt to keep people under the age of 16 or 18.
It's interesting because there are some things that for those kids are, but this is what's really fascinating. The way China is handling it is so different than America. China's version of TikTok celebrates academic achievements, athletic achievements. It's all science projects, all these different fascinating things, and they lock it out at 10 p.m. At 10 p.m., no one's on it. Those kids are not allowed to get on it because they're trying to encourage achievement. They're trying to encourage, like China has a program to try to make men more manly, like this open program where they're trying to make men more masculine. They're doing all these things with like this idea of engineering a society of more accomplished, more successful people. Whereas what are we doing on TikTok? Kids are dancing and they're
Kardashian memes.
They're screaming about veganism and how blue their hair is, and it's wild.
Yeah. I wonder.
The difference is interesting because I don't think we should engineer the way our society interacts with each other. But if you look at the way China's doing it, like they're doing it clearly with this idea that they want to stimulate young minds and they want to promote this idea that doing things that you are, like you're going to become more accomplished, you're going to become more athletic, you're going to, like these are what they're trying to encourage.
I mean, I'm a little bit reticent about holding anything up that the Chinese Communist Party does as being a great idea. And if we're worried about things like the New York Post article about Joe Biden's son's laptop being suppressed by Twitter, just wait till you get... And all of the people who are being suppressed on conventional social media outlets, like just wait till you get a load of what a bureaucracy would do if they had control over what the algorithms show you as well.
No denying that. No one would ever argue that with a clear conscience.
Yeah. So, I mean, what do you do? Like, I mean, the other thing that Haidt says is maybe you try to force them to make the algorithms, like, not constantly addictive. Because, I mean, I think what people don't necessarily always think about when you're using these platforms is that they're not blank open spaces into which your friends and the people you're following are commenting, and then it's just kind of, filtering down in a neutral way. It's obviously being rejigged at the back end to maximize the time that you're spending on the site. All the algorithm wants to do is to keep you there for 1 second longer so that they can maximize the time that you're spending on the platform. John Haidt's like, could you change that algorithm so that it's like, more fulfilling stuff instead of more addictive stuff? And I'm like, I don't know how you would legislate that. I don't know how you would make them do that.
That's what China's doing. I think essentially the only way to do it is to have no algorithms. Just allow people to search what they enjoy and find it on their own. The suggested side of YouTube, that's what gets you.
Yes.
And it seems like they've stopped auto-playing new shows.
Really?
Is that real, Jamie? Like, when I watch YouTube, it doesn't necessarily always do that anymore. Like, sometimes it just shows me a new video, but sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes the video just stops.
It could just be they maybe just change the default setting to off, and maybe you have to turn it back on or something. It could be something like that.
Well, that's probably good, but if there was no algorithm whatsoever, the argument would be that, well, there's probably a lot of things that you would be introduced to that you would enjoy that you're going to miss if there's no algorithm at all.
Yeah, sure. And that would be fine. I mean, isn't that the way that I wander through life normally? Like, there's all kinds of stuff that's out there that I miss because it's not being constantly shoved into my face. Like, I don't necessarily need the most addictive food at all times. I can also just sometimes have a salad.
Right, but the business model for them, like they're concerned with the most engagement. And the best way to get the most engagement is find out what Josh Zepps likes and then show it to him over and over and over again.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, as you say, once AR and like whenever you talk about like haptic feedback suits and stuff like that, my mind just goes to like once porn gets mastered in that world, there's going to be a large percentage of the population that's just in the basement for prolonged periods of time.
All right, Nick, this is one of the things that scares people more than anything. Is the idea that we're creating something or someone's going to create something that's going to be smarter than us. It's going to replace us. Is that something we should really be concerned about?
I presume you're referring to babies.
I'm referring to artificial intelligence.
Ah, yes. Well, it's the big fear and the big hope, I think.
Both?
At the same time, yeah.
How is it the big hope?
Well, there are a lot of things wrong with the world as it is now.
Pull this up to your face if you would.
All the problems we have, most of them could be solved if we were smarter or if we had somebody on our side who were a lot smarter with better technology and so forth. Also, I think if we want to imagine some really grand future where humanity or our descendants one day go out and colonize the universe, I think that's likely to happen, if it's going to happen at all, after we have superintelligence that then develops the technology to make that possible.
The real question is whether or not we would be able to harness this intelligence or whether it would dominate.
Yeah, that certainly is one question. Not the only. You could imagine that we harness it, but then use it for bad purposes, as we have a lot of other technologies through history. Yeah. So I think there are really two challenges we need to meet. One is to make sure we can align it with human values, and then make sure that we together do something better with it than fighting wars or oppressing one another.
I think, well, what I'm worried about more than anything is that human beings are going to become obsolete, that we're going to invent something that's the next stage of evolution. I'm really concerned with that. I'm really concerned with if we look back on ancient hominids, Australopithecus, just think of some primitive ancestor of man. We don't want to go back to that. Like that's a terrible way to live. I'm worried that what we're creating is the next thing.
I think we don't necessarily want, or at least I wouldn't be totally thrilled with a future where humanity as it is now was the last and final word, the ultimate version beyond.
Right.
I think there's a lot of room for improvement.
Sure.
But not anything that is different is an improvement.
Right.
So the key would be, I think, to find some path forward where the best in us can continue to exist and develop to even greater levels. And maybe at the end of that path, it looks nothing like we do now. Maybe it's not two-legged, two-armed creatures running around with 3 pounds of thinking matter, right? It might be something quite different. But as long as what we value is present there, and ideally in a much higher degree than in the current world, then that could count as a success.
Yeah, the idea that we're in a state of evolution, that we are, just like we look at ancient hominids, that we are eventually going to become something more advanced or at least more complicated than we are now. But what I'm worried is that biological life itself has so many limitations. When we look at the evolution of technology, if you look at Moore's Law, or if you just look at new cell phones, like they just released a new iPhone yesterday, and they talked about all these incremental increases in the ability to take photographs and wide-angle lenses and night mode and a new chip that works even faster. These things, there's not the word evolution is incorrect, but the innovation of technology is so much more rapid than anything we could ever even imagine biologically. Like if we had a thing that we had created, if we had created, instead of artificial intelligence in terms of like something in a chip or a computer, if we created a life form, a biological life form, but this biological life form was improving radically every year, like it didn't even exist. Like the iPhone existed in 2007. That's when it was invented. If we had something that was 12 years old, but all of a sudden was infinitely faster and better and smarter and wiser than it was 12 years ago, the newest version of it, version X1, we would start going, whoa, hit the brakes on this thing, man. How many more generations before this thing's way smarter than us? How many more generations before this thing thinks that human beings are obsolete?
Yeah, it's coming at us fast. It feels
Yes.
like. I mean, but some people think, oh, it's slowing down now.
Who thinks it's slowing down?
Well, don't they have like Tyler Cowen and even Peter Thiel sometimes goes on about the pace of innovation not really being what it needs to be. I mean, maybe it was faster in like 1890s, but still, compared to almost all of human history, it seems like a period of unprecedented rapid progress right now.